He didn't just betray his wife. He brought the betrayal home. After 10 years of marriage, Adrian walked into his mansion with his rich, pregnant mistress on his arm, not ashamed, not sorry, but proud. His mother stood beside him like a queen, smiling because this had been her plan all along. She had convinced him that his wife, Elena, was weak, useless, replaceable, a woman with no child, no voice, and no value in their powerful family. So Adrian gave Elena an order. Accept the mistress or leave. The room went silent. His sister laughed first. Then his mother smiled. Then the mistress placed a hand on her belly and looked at Elena like she had already taken her throne. But Elena did not cry. She did not beg. She did not fight for a man who had already sold his loyalty. She simply stood up, removed her wedding ring, placed it on the table, and said one sentence that froze the room. I hope you can afford the life you just chose. Adrian laughed. His mother called her dramatic. His sister mocked her one last time. But none of them knew Elena's secret. For years, while they treated her like a decoration in their family mansion, Elena had been building an empire in silence. She was not just the quiet wife they ignored. She was the hidden owner of the corporation that had secretly bought Adrian's collapsing family business. Their money, connected to her. Their mansion, protected by her. Their company, already in her hands. By sunrise, Adrian's accounts were frozen. By noon, his mistress lost access to every luxury he had promised her. By evening, his mother received the eviction notice. And by nightfall, the sister who mocked Elena was begging security to let her back inside a house she no longer owned. Adrian finally understood the truth. He had not thrown away a weak wife. He had thrown away the most powerful woman in the room. And when Elena returned, she did not come back crying. She came back with lawyers, contracts, and the kind of silence that destroys dynasties. Because some women break when they are betrayed. But Elena, she became the storm that buried them all. Dear viewers, if you were Elena, would you have walked away in silence, or would you have made them regret every insult, every betrayal, and every moment they thought you were powerless? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this story is about betrayal, hidden power, family greed, and the dangerous mistake of underestimating the wrong woman. The first time Elena heard the name Morty, she was 19 years old, standing in a university library with a stack of finance books pressed against her chest and rain dripping from the ends of her hair. She had been late to a lecture, soaked from a storm that had swallowed the city without warning, when a young man in a tailored navy coat stepped aside and held the door open for her. He had the kind of face people trusted before they knew better. Sharp jaw, warm smile, eyes that made promises quickly. He looked at the books in her arms, then at her drenched shoes and said, "You look like someone who refuses to lose." Elena remembered that line years later. Not because it was sweet, because it had been a warning dressed as a compliment. His name was Adrian Morty, heir to Morty Legacy Holdings, the oldest luxury construction and real estate empire in the city. People whispered about the Mortys the way they whispered about royalty. They owned hotels, estates, private clubs, and half the skyline. Their family portrait hung in charity halls. Their last name appeared on museum wings. Their matriarch, Valeria Morty, was a woman whose smile could silence an entire room. Elena had not cared about any of it. Back then, she was only trying to survive. Her father, Dominic Vale, had died when she was 16. To the world, he had been a quiet accountant with modest savings, but to the few who knew the truth, he had been one of the most brilliant private investors in the country. He had hidden his fortune behind trusts, shell companies, and a final instruction in his will. Elena was not to inherit full control until she turned 28, and until then, her identity as the beneficiary of Vale Global Partners was to remain sealed. Power is safest when fools cannot see it, her father had told her when she was 12, placing a fountain pen in her hand and teaching her how to sign her name. Never announce your worth to people who are only looking for what they can take. At 12, Elena had not understood. At 19, she thought she did. At 32, standing in her marital home while her husband brought another woman under her roof, she finally knew her father had been preparing her for war. Adrian pursued her slowly at first, coffee after lectures, a ride during rainstorms, notes slipped into books. He told her he admired her intelligence, her calm, her ability to listen more than she spoke. He said the women in his world were loud with money and empty with meaning. "You are different," he said one night at a small restaurant by the river. Elena should have asked him whether he loved different women or merely enjoyed collecting them until they became inconvenient. But she was young, and Adrian was convincing. Their wedding came 3 years later, beneath white orchids and chandeliers bright enough to make every guest look wealthy. Valeria Morty wore silver, not because she loved the color, but because it made her look like a blade. She kissed Elena on both cheeks and whispered, "Welcome to the family. I hope you understand what that means." Elena did not understand then. She would soon. The Morty mansion sat on a hill overlooking the city, its marble columns glowing at night like a palace built to intimidate. The first time Elena walked through its front doors as Adrian's wife, she noticed the silence. Not peaceful silence, controlled silence. The staff moved softly. The family spoke carefully. Even the clock seemed afraid to tick too loudly. At dinner, Valeria sat at the head of the table, Adrian at her right, his younger sister Bianca at her left. Elena sat beside Adrian, smiling politely as Valeria discussed charity boards, politicians, and old money alliances. Bianca watched Elena with amusement, as if waiting for her to use the wrong fork. "So," Bianca said, twirling her wine glass, "what exactly does your family do, Elena?" "My father worked in finance," Elena replied. "Worked?" Bianca asked. "He passed away." Valeria lowered her eyes for 1 second, not in sympathy but calculation. "And your mother?" "She passed when I was young." Bianca gave a soft laugh. How tragic. Adrian always did have a weakness for broken things. Adrian squeezed Elena's hand under the table, but he did not defend her. That was the first crack. Not the betrayal itself, but the discovery that Adrian loved peace more than justice and approval more than loyalty. Over the years, Elena learned the rhythm of Morty cruelty. It rarely arrived as shouting. It arrived as compliments with poison hidden inside them. Valeria praised Elena's simple dresses by calling them humble. Bianca admired Elena's restraint by calling her plain. At parties, when investors asked Elena about business, Valeria interrupted with, "Elena prefers domestic matters." When Elena corrected a financial error in a board proposal Adrian had left on the kitchen counter, he smiled and said, "You're sharper than people think." People think. Those 2 words stayed with her. People think you are quiet. People think you are weak. People think you are lucky to be here. And because Elena had promised her father she would never reveal her true position before the trust matured, she let them think it. She became fluent in silence. She smiled through insults. She memorized everything. By the 5th year of her marriage, Morty Legacy Holdings was already rotting from inside. Adrian's grandfather had built the empire with discipline. His father had expanded it with arrogance. Adrian inherited it with entitlement. The company looked powerful from the outside, but behind the glass walls and glossy press releases, its foundations were cracking. Projects were delayed. Loans were overextended. Vendors were unpaid. Valeria blamed the economy. Bianca blamed incompetent managers. Adrian blamed everyone except himself. Elena saw the numbers before anyone admitted the danger. She saw the emergency credit lines hidden beneath strategic expansion. She saw the inflated property valuations. She saw the desperate refinancing. She saw the way Adrian's hands trembled after late-night calls, though he pretended it was fatigue. One night she found him in his study, staring at a letter from a private lender. "Adrian," she said softly, You need to restructure before the banks force you to. He snatched the letter from the desk. You wouldn't understand. I understand debt. He laughed. Tired and cruel, reading books doesn't make you an expert. Elena looked at him for a long moment. On the wall behind him hung a portrait of his grandfather, a stern man with eyes like judgment. Beneath the portrait was the Morty family motto engraved in gold, "Legacy is blood." Elena almost told him then. She almost said her father's company could save his, that she had been studying the acquisition market, that she had quietly taken advisory meetings under another name, that her trust would unlock soon, and she already knew exactly how to use it. Instead, she remembered her father's voice. Never hand a drowning man your boat if he keeps drilling holes in it. So she said nothing. And Adrian mistook her restraint for ignorance. By the 7th year, the marriage had become a mansion with locked rooms. Adrian came home later. He traveled more. He spent weekends at investor retreats and returned smelling like expensive perfume that was not Elena's. She noticed the lipstick on his collar once, faint and peach-colored. He said it was from a client greeting. She noticed a hotel receipt folded into his wallet. He said his assistant booked the wrong suite. She noticed the name Cassandra Velez appearing again and again in his messages, beside heart emojis he claimed were industry jokes. Elena did not explode. That frightened Adrian more than anger would have. What? He snapped one night when he found her looking at his phone on the counter. Nothing, Elena said. Then why are you staring? Because people are usually careless when they believe they are untouchable. His face tightened. What is that supposed to mean? It means be careful, Adrian. He laughed, but he did not sleep well that night. Cassandra Velez was everything Valeria wished Elena had been, loud with beauty, rich in appearance, eager for attention, and skilled at making powerful men feel brilliant. Her father owned a chain of private medical clinics, though much of the family fortune was borrowed, leveraged, and polished for public display. Cassandra wore diamonds to breakfast and posted photos from yachts she did not own. She was charming to those above her, dismissive to those beneath her, and ruthless toward anyone standing between her and a better life. She met Adrian at a charity auction for children's hospitals. Elena was there that night, wearing a black satin dress, and the emerald earrings Adrian had forgotten were a gift from her father, not from him. Cassandra laughed too loudly at Adrian's jokes. Valeria noticed, Bianca noticed, Elena noticed most of all. Later, near the balcony, Cassandra leaned close to Adrian and touched his sleeve. Elena watched from across the room. Beside her, Valeria said, "Some women know how to keep a man's attention." Elena did not look at her, and some women know how to keep receipts. Valeria's smile thinned. Careful, Elena, sharp words do not suit women with fragile positions. My position is stronger than you think. Then why does no one see it? Elena turned then, calm as winter, because I haven't needed them to. Valeria studied her for a moment. For the first time, a small uncertainty moved behind the older woman's eyes. Then Bianca called her away, and the moment passed. But Valeria remembered. Cruel people always remember the second someone refuses to shrink. The pregnancy changed everything. Adrian told his mother before he told Elena. That alone should have ended the marriage. Valeria received the news like a military victory. Bianca called Cassandra the future of the family before she had even crossed the threshold. Adrian, terrified of scandal, yet intoxicated by the idea of an heir, allowed his mother to shape the disaster into a plan. You will bring Cassandra here, Valeria said one afternoon in the mansion's sunroom. Not hidden, not ashamed. If Elena has dignity, she will leave quietly. If she refuses, we will make her understand. Adrian paced near the windows. It will look bad. Valeria's cane struck the marble once. She did not need the cane, but she carried it because it made every room sound like a courtroom. What looks bad is a Morty heir being born outside this house while your wife sits here pretending she matters. She is still my wife. She is a placeholder, Bianca said from the sofa, scrolling through her phone, and an unsuccessful one. Adrian flinched, but again, he did not defend Alina. Valeria leaned forward. Listen to me. Your father nearly lost everything because he let sentiment guide him. I will not watch you do the same. Cassandra brings a child, public sympathy, and connections to the Vélez medical network. Alina brings nothing. Nothing. The word floated through the house and settled in the walls. But beneath the city, in a private office with no Morty name on the door, Alina's attorneys were finalizing the last stage of a hostile acquisition. Vale Global Partners had spent 18 months buying Morty debt through intermediaries, quietly, legally, patiently. Every overdue loan, every distressed bond, every unpaid contractor claim Adrian had dismissed as manageable had been collected by companies that all led back to one person. Alina. The final purchase agreement had arrived that morning in a sealed black folder. On its cover was a silver V. Vale. Her father's letterhead. Her inheritance. Her weapon. Alina placed it in the bottom drawer of her desk and locked it. Then she went upstairs and chose a plain cream dress for dinner. By then, she already knew Adrian was bringing Cassandra home. The house warned her before he arrived. The staff were nervous. Fresh flowers had been placed in the West Guest suite, the suite with the best morning light. Valeria had ordered champagne, though Alina knew she hated champagne unless she was celebrating someone else's defeat. Bianca had come early, wearing red lipstick and a smile that made her look like a child waiting for a fight at school. At exactly 7, the front doors opened. Adrian entered first. Cassandra followed, one hand resting on her belly, the other looped through his arm. Valeria stood behind them like a priestess, blessing a sacrifice. Alina was seated in the drawing room, a book open in her lap. She did not rise immediately. She looked at Adrian, then at Cassandra, then at Valeria, and finally at Bianca, whose eyes sparkled with vicious delight. For one fragile second, Adrian looked ashamed. Then his mother placed a hand on his shoulder. And shame disappeared. Alina, he said, clearing his throat, we need to talk. No, Alina replied, closing the book. You need to perform, so perform. Bianca laughed. She's dramatic already. Cassandra lifted her chin. I didn't come here to fight. No, Alina said, you came here to move in. Cassandra's lips parted, but Valeria stepped forward. This situation is unfortunate, Valeria said, using the tone she reserved for firing employees and humiliating waiters. But life does not always give us what we want. Cassandra is carrying Adrian's child, a Morty child, that changes priorities. Alina looked at Adrian, and what do you want? He swallowed, I want peace. Alina almost smiled. Men like Adrian always called surrender peace when someone else had to bleed for it. He continued, gaining confidence because she had not screamed. Cassandra will stay here until the baby is born. After that, we'll decide arrangements. Arrangements, Alina repeated. You'll be treated respectfully, Adrian said. Bianca snorted, more respectfully than most women in her position. Alina turned to her, my position. Bianca leaned back, satisfied, the wife who couldn't give this family an heir. Silence. Even Cassandra glanced away. There are insults that strike the ear, and there are insults that reveal the soul of the person speaking. Alina had spent years being asked about children with fake concern and real cruelty. What none of them knew was that Alina had once wanted a child so badly she had kept a tiny pair of white baby shoes in the back of her closet for 3 years. She had bought them after her first pregnancy test showed 2 lines. She had wrapped them in tissue paper and hidden them because she wanted to surprise Adrian at dinner. That same week, Valeria had told her, a child is not a pet, Alina. Morty heirs must be born from strength. Alina had smiled through it, gone upstairs, and held the little shoes against her chest. 2 days later, the pregnancy ended before she could tell anyone. The doctor called it common, natural, nobody's fault. Elena had cried alone in the bathroom while Adrian was at a golf weekend with investors. When she finally told him months later that she had lost a pregnancy, he held her for exactly 1 minute before asking why she had not told him sooner. Somehow, even her grief became a flaw in her behavior. After that, the tests were uncertain. The treatments were private. The appointments were lonely. Adrian attended too, then became too busy. Valeria began making comments about empty branches on the family tree. Bianca bought baby gifts for friends and made sure Elena saw them. Elena buried the pain so deeply that even she rarely touched it. But Bianca had found the grave and danced on it. Elena stood. The room seemed to shrink. Adrian said quickly, "Bianca, enough." But enough had come years too late. Elena removed her wedding ring. It slid off easily. That was strange. Once, she had thought it would feel like tearing skin. Instead, it felt like setting down a weight she had mistaken for a vow. She placed it on the table. The diamond caught the chandelier light and threw it across the ceiling like a signal. "Keep the house," Elena said. "Keep the name, keep the performance." Adrian blinked. "Elena. No, you wanted peace. Here it is." Valeria's mouth curved. "For once, you are being sensible." Elena looked at her, and something in the older woman's smile faltered. "I hope you can afford the life you just chose," Elena said. Bianca clapped slowly. "Was that supposed to scare us?" Elena picked up her handbag. "No, it was supposed to warn you." She walked out without another word. No suitcase. No tears. No backward glance. The staff watched from the corners of the hallway, eyes lowered but hearts racing. Many of them had been treated kindly by Elena and coldly by Valeria. One maid, Rosa, pressed her hand to her mouth as Elena passed. Elena paused only once, near the front doors, and touched the carved wood frame. 10 years. 10 years of dinners and lies. 10 years of sleeping beside a man who confused possession with love. 10 years of being measured by what her body had not given them, while they ignored what her mind had built. Outside, rain had begun to fall, just like the day she met Adrian. A black car waited at the bottom of the steps. The driver opened the door. "Vale Tower, ma'am?" he asked. Elena looked back at the mansion. In the highest window, Valeria's silhouette stood watching. "Yes," Elena said, "it's time." The next morning, Adrian woke in the master bedroom with a headache and the uneasy feeling that something had shifted while he slept. Cassandra was still asleep beside him, one hand curved protectively over her stomach. Her designer luggage lined the wall, bright and expensive, as if she had conquered a country instead of entered another woman's home. Adrian should have felt triumphant. His mother had told him he had done what strong men do, chosen legacy over guilt. But the room felt wrong. Elena's side of the closet was empty. Not stripped bare in a dramatic rage, not torn apart, simply cleared, organized, final. Her perfumes were gone, her books were gone, her cream scarf was gone from the chair near the window. The small silver photo frame from their honeymoon was gone too, though Adrian had not looked at it in years. Only one thing remained. A sealed envelope on the dresser. His name was written across it in Elena's handwriting. For a moment, he did not open it. Some instinct, old and animal, told him not to. Then his phone began ringing. His CFO. Adrian ignored it. Another call came. Then another. Then a message from the bank. Urgent credit facility suspension notice. His stomach dropped. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. "Adrian, you asked for peace, so I am removing myself from every obligation I carried in silence. Effective immediately, all personal guarantees, private support arrangements, and discretionary protections connected to your family's holdings are terminated. You chose your future publicly. I have accepted your decision privately. Elena. Adrian read it 3 times. He did not understand until his CFO burst into the house 20 minutes later, face pale, tie crooked, sweating through his collar. "Who is Vale Global?" the man demanded. Adrian was still in his robe. "What?" "Vale Global Partners, they own the debt. Not some lender, not some investment group. They bought everything. The hotel loans, the development bonds, the contractor liens, the bridge financing, everything." Valeria entered the room wearing pearls and irritation. "Why are you shouting in my house?" The CFO looked at her like a man watching a building burn. "Because this house may not be yours by the end of the week." Valeria froze. Bianca, arriving behind her with coffee in hand, laughed. "That's not funny." "No," the CFO said, "it's not." Adrian grabbed the papers. "That's impossible. We had extensions. They were cancelled at midnight." "By whom?" "By the controlling creditor." "Who controls Vale Global?" Valeria asked. The CFO hesitated. That hesitation did what no insult, no accusation, no warning had ever done. It scared her. "I don't know," he said. "The ownership is layered through trusts, but whoever they are, they've been watching us for a long time." "Watching?" Adrian remembered Elena's eyes across dinner tables. Elena reading documents he left unattended. Elena asking quiet questions. Elena telling him to restructure before the banks forced him to. Elena saying, "Be careful." For the first time in years, he wondered whether silence had not been weakness. Maybe it had been surveillance. Cassandra came downstairs in a silk robe, annoyed by the noise. "What's happening?" Bianca turned on her. "Your prince may be broke." Cassandra's face changed instantly, not with fear for Adrian, but fear for herself. Adrian noticed. It should have hurt. Instead, he barely had room for another wound. By noon, Cassandra's card declined at a luxury boutique. She called Adrian screaming from a private fitting room. "Do you know how embarrassing this is? They treated me like some fraud." Adrian was in the boardroom at Morty Legacy, surrounded by lawyers, executives, and men who had once praised him, but now avoided his eyes. "I'm dealing with a crisis," he snapped. "I am pregnant with your child," Cassandra said. "Your crisis includes me." Across the table, an attorney slid a document toward Adrian. "Notice of default." Another followed. "Notice of foreclosure rights." Another. "Mandatory board review." By evening, the company's emergency meeting had turned into an execution. The lead attorney for Vale Global Partners arrived at 6 sharp. Her name was Miriam Cross, and she looked like someone who had never once raised her voice because she had never needed to. She wore a charcoal suit, carried a black folder, and placed it on the table with terrifying gentleness. "Mr. Morty," she said, "your company has failed to satisfy the terms of multiple debt instruments now consolidated under our client's authority. As controlling creditor, our client is exercising immediate rights to restructure leadership, freeze non-essential expenditures, and secure collateral assets." Adrian gripped the table. "Who is your client?" Miriam opened the folder. A silver V shone on the letterhead. He knew before she said it. Something inside him knew, and still his pride tried to reject it. "Our client," Miriam said, "is Elena Vale." The room went dead. Not quiet. Dead. Valeria, who had insisted on attending the meeting, stared at Miriam as if the attorney had spoken in another language. "Elena Morty," Valeria said sharply. Miriam did not blink. "No, Elena Vale. She resumed her legal name this morning." Adrian stood so quickly his chair fell backward. "This is a trick." "No," Miriam said. "It is an acquisition. She doesn't have that kind of money." Miriam looked almost bored. That assumption appears to have been central to your family's mistake. Bianca whispered, Elena. There it was. Not Elena, the barren wife. Not Elena, the quiet nobody. Not Elena, the decoration. Elena. A name suddenly heavy enough to crush them. Miriam continued. Effective immediately, Mr. Morty is suspended from all executive decision-making pending review. Mrs. Valeria Morty is to vacate the residence secured under corporate collateral within 48 hours unless alternative arrangements are approved. Company vehicles, discretionary accounts, and luxury expense lines are frozen. Cassandra, who had arrived late and stood near the back of the room in oversized sunglasses, lowered them slowly. What about my medical account? Miriam turned one page. Ms. Velez, your private support agreement was never approved by the board. Any payments made from company resources may be subject to recovery. Cassandra's mouth opened. For once, no sound came out. Adrian looked around the room, desperate for someone to object, someone to say the Mortys could not be treated this way. But the executives who had flattered him yesterday were studying the table today. They understood money better than loyalty. Valeria rose, trembling with fury. I demand to speak with Elena. Miriam closed the folder. Ms. Vale anticipated that. She placed a small envelope on the table. Valeria snatched it open. Inside was a handwritten note. Valeria, you once told me every woman should know her place. Today you will learn yours. Elena. Bianca gasped. Adrian's face went grey. Valeria crushed the note in her fist, but her hand shook so badly the paper crackled like fire. That night, Elena stood alone in Vale Tower, 40 floors above the city, looking down at the glowing streets below. Her office was not extravagant. Her father had taught her that truly powerful rooms did not need to shout. A wide desk, a wall of books, a framed photograph of Dominic Vale holding Elena as a child. The fountain pen he had given her rested in a glass case near the window. Miriam called at 9:15. It's done, she said. Elena closed her eyes briefly. How did they take it? As expected, denial, rage, disbelief. And Adrian. Destroyed. The word should have satisfied her. It did not. That was the thing no revenge story ever admitted. Justice could return what was stolen, but it could not give back the years. It could not rewrite the nights Elena sat alone at charity dinners while Adrian flirted across the room. It could not erase the ache of holding baby shoes no child ever wore. It could not make Valeria kind, Bianca decent, Cassandra ashamed, or Adrian loyal. It could only stop them. And stopping them had become necessary. Elena looked at her father's photograph. I gave him too many chances, she said. Miriam's voice softened. You gave him enough rope, he tied the knot himself. Elena said nothing. Outside, lightning flashed over the city. On her desk lay a second folder, thicker than the first. Inside were copies of Cassandra's financial statements, clinic debts tied to her father's network, luxury loans taken out against fake projected income, and a private agreement showing Cassandra had planned to pressure Adrian into transferring property before the baby was born. Elena had not gone looking for Cassandra at first. But Cassandra had inserted herself into Elena's home, Elena's marriage, and Elena's humiliation. Worse, she had done so with open contempt, believing pregnancy made her untouchable and cruelty made her powerful. Elena would not harm a child. She would not attack motherhood. But she would expose fraud. And Cassandra had built her life on it. The next morning, the story hit the business press. Vale Global Partners takes control of MOITTI Legacy Holdings after debt consolidation. The article did not mention the affair. Elena had made sure of that. She would not let tabloid gossip overshadow corporate discipline. The public saw a clean business move, a failing family empire absorbed by a stronger private firm. Investors praised the restructuring. Analysts called it inevitable. Employees, many of whom had feared layoffs under Adrian, quietly celebrated when Vale Global announced payroll protections and vendor repayment plans. That detail enraged Adrian most. Elena did not destroy the company. She saved it from him. She removed his access, not the workers' livelihoods. She froze Valeria's luxuries, not employee pensions. She sold 3 unused family vehicles, but kept the construction teams paid. She cancelled Bianca's brand development salary, which had paid her 6 figures for posting photos at company events, but preserved health benefits for staff. Every move was precise. Every cut exposed waste. Every signature revealed who had been carrying whom. At the mansion, Valeria refused to pack. "This house belongs to my family," she told the security team. The head of security, a man named Thomas who had worked there for 12 years, looked uncomfortable but firm. "Ma'am, the property is corporate collateral under the new ownership structure." "I hired you." "No, ma'am," Thomas said quietly, "the company did." Bianca stood in the foyer surrounded by designer luggage. "This is insane. She can't just kick us out." A maid passed carrying a box of Valeria's porcelain figurines. Bianca snapped, "Careful with that. It's worth more than your salary." The maid looked at her for the first time without fear. "Not anymore, miss. Appraisal team said most of them are replicas." Bianca went silent. Valeria's face turned scarlet. Small humiliations can hurt proud people more than great disasters. The loss of money frightened them, but the loss of illusion wounded them. They had spent years believing their taste, their name, their presence made things valuable. Now strangers in suits walked through their rooms and assigned numbers to their lives. By sunset, Valeria and Bianca stood outside the mansion gates. Their cars had been repossessed. Their accounts were frozen pending review. Cassandra had already left for a hotel, though the hotel later requested a different credit card and declined her reservation when none worked. Adrian remained inside only because Miriam had granted him 24 hours to collect personal belongings. He walked through the mansion like a ghost. Every room accused him. In the dining room, he saw Elena the night Bianca had mocked her charity speech, and he had told Elena not to be sensitive. In the garden, he saw Elena kneeling beside roses, laughing softly as rain dotted her hair. In the library, he saw her reading company reports while he dismissed her questions. In the bedroom, he opened a drawer and found, tucked behind an old scarf, a small tissue-wrapped bundle. White baby shoes. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. For a long time, he could not move. He remembered the year Elena had become quieter than usual, how she had cried once in the shower and told him she was tired when he asked, how a clinic had called the house and he had ignored the message because he was late for a meeting, how she had tried to talk one night and he had said, "Can this wait? I have a flight." It had waited. It had waited until it turned into silence. His phone rang. Cassandra. He let it ring. Then his mother. Then Bianca. Then Cassandra again. Finally, he answered. "Adrian," Cassandra said, voice sharp, "my father just called. Vale Global's legal team is investigating the clinic accounts. They're saying some of my expenses were billed through Morty channels." "Were they? That's not the point." "It sounds like the point." She inhaled sharply. "Don't you dare turn on me. You promised me stability." Adrian looked at the baby shoes in his hand. "I promised my wife forever." Cassandra was silent for half a second, then she laughed coldly, and look how that turned out. The line went dead. Adrian stared at the phone. He had thought Cassandra admired him, then he thought she needed him. Now, stripped of accounts and status, he saw the truth. Cassandra had loved the life he represented, not him. Maybe he had known all along. Maybe that was why he chose her. Real love demanded accountability. Greed only demanded gifts. The following week, Cassandra's world collapsed faster than the Mortys. Vale Global filed a civil claim against several unauthorized transfers tied to Morty corporate accounts. Cassandra's father's clinics came under lender review. Creditors who had once extended generous terms suddenly asked for documentation. The luxury apartment Cassandra had leased under an anticipated family support trust was cancelled. Her publicist resigned after invoices went unpaid. Cassandra called Valeria first. Valeria did not answer. She called Adrian. He answered once. "You need to fix this," she said. "I can't." "You mean you won't?" "I mean I have nothing left to fix it with." "What about Elena?" Adrian closed his eyes. "Do not say her name like she owes us something." Cassandra's voice turned brittle. "So that's it, you're abandoning me." "No," Adrian said. "I'm finally admitting I abandoned someone else first." "It was not redemption." "Not yet. Maybe not ever." A ruined man discovering regret does not erase the ruin he caused, but it was the first honest sentence Adrian had spoken in years. Valeria and Bianca moved into a serviced apartment paid for by the sale of Valeria's personal jewelry. It had 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, and no staff. Bianca cried the first night because the closet was too small. Valeria sat on the sofa, staring at her hands, unable to process that no one was coming to rescue them. "Call Elena," Bianca said. Valeria's eyes flashed. "Never." "Then call Adrian." "He has nothing." "Then what are we supposed to do?" Valeria looked toward the window. The city glittered beyond it, indifferent and unreachable. For the first time in her life, she did not have an answer. That scared Bianca more than poverty. Her mother had always been certainty in human form. Valeria knew which families mattered, which women belonged, which men could be controlled, which servants could be replaced, which secrets could be buried. She had raised Bianca to believe cruelty was sophistication and dependence was something other women suffered. Now Bianca was 28, unemployed, unskilled, and furious that the world did not recognize her as important without the house, the clothes, and the name. 2 days later, she went to Morty headquarters, determined to confront Elena. Security stopped her in the lobby. "I'm Bianca Morty," she snapped. The receptionist smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "Do I have an appointment? This is my family's company." A voice behind her said, "Not anymore." Bianca turned. Elena stood near the elevator in a white suit, her hair pulled back, her expression calm. She looked different, but Bianca could not say how. Richer, yes, but it was not the suit. Colder, yes, but not cruel. She looked like a woman who had finally stopped carrying weight that belonged to other people. "Elena," Bianca said, recovering her sneer, "enjoying your little power trip?" Elena walked toward her. "No, I am working." "You humiliated us. You handled that yourselves." Bianca stepped closer. "You think money makes you better than us?" "No," Elena said. "I think character does. Money only revealed who had none." Bianca's face hardened. "You were nothing in that house." Elena tilted her head. "And yet the house was mine." That struck like a slap. Bianca looked around the lobby. Employees were watching discreetly. The same employees she had ignored, ordered around, and mocked at events. Nobody came to her defense. "My mother will never forgive you," Bianca said. Elena's gaze did not waver. "Your mother taught you that forgiveness is something powerful people withhold to control others. I am not asking for hers." "And Adrian." For the first time, a shadow crossed Elena's face. Then it was gone. "Adrian made a choice. He regrets it." "Elena the wife might have cared," she said. "Elena Vale has meetings." Bianca's lips trembled, not from sadness but rage. "You're enjoying this." Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Bianca could hear. "No, I enjoyed none of it. Not the insults, not the loneliness, not the appointments I attended alone, not the way your family measured my worth by a child I grieved in silence, not the years I spent making myself smaller so your brother could feel like a man. This is not enjoyment, Bianca. This is consequence. Bianca opened her mouth, but nothing came. Elena turned to security. Please escort Ms. Morty out. As Bianca was led away, she shouted, You'll always be Baron. The lobby froze. Elena stopped. Slowly, she turned back. Every employee held their breaths. Elena walked to Bianca with terrifying calm. You keep using that word, Elena said, as if a woman's worth begins and ends with what her body gives to others. That belief is why your family lost everything. You looked at women and saw functions, wives, mothers, ornaments, tools. You never saw people, and because you never saw people, you never saw me. Bianca's face flushed. Elena's voice remained steady. The next time you try to insult me with my pain, remember this. I survived what you mocked. You cannot shame me with a wound I already healed from. Then she walked into the elevator. The doors closed, and Bianca, for the first time in her life, looked small. Adrian tried to see Elena 3 times. The first time, Miriam refused. The second time, Elena's assistant said Ms. Vale was unavailable. The third time, Adrian waited outside Vale Tower in the rain. It was almost too poetic, and life, being cruel, often arranges its punishments with a sense of theater. Elena exited at 6:30, surrounded by 2 aides and a security officer. She stopped when she saw him. He looked older, not by years, but by truth. His coat was wrinkled, his jaw unshaven. The arrogance that once carried him into rooms ahead of his body had deserted him. Elena, he said. She dismissed her aides with a glance. They stepped aside but remained nearby. You have 5 minutes, she said. He swallowed. I found the shoes. Her expression changed. Not much. Just enough to show he had touched something sacred without permission. You had no right, she said. I know. No, she said, you don't. Rain slid down his face. I'm sorry. Elena looked at him for a long moment. For what? For all of it. That is what men say when they do not want to name their crimes. He flinched. She waited. Adrian looked at the pavement. I'm sorry I let my mother disrespect you. I'm sorry I let Bianca humiliate you. I'm sorry I made you grieve alone. I'm sorry I treated your silence like emptiness. I'm sorry I brought Cassandra into your home. I'm sorry I chose a fantasy over the woman who stood beside me when everything was falling apart. Elena listened. The rain grew heavier. And she asked. He looked up. And I'm sorry, I only understood your value when I lost access to it. There it was. The first honest apology. Too late but honest. Elena exhaled slowly. Do you know what the saddest part is, Adrian? He shook his head. I would have helped you. His eyes reddened. Not because you deserved it, she said. Because I loved you. If you had come to me honestly, if you had treated me as a partner instead of furniture, if you had defended me once when it mattered, I would have helped you rebuild everything. I know. No, you know now, that is different. He stepped closer, desperate. Security moved, but Elena lifted one hand to stop them. Is there any chance? He asked. Elena's face softened, and for one dangerous second, he saw the woman who had once loved him. Then she said, the chance was every day for 10 years. Adrian bowed his head. She turned to leave. Elena, he said. She paused. Did you ever love me? That question hurt more than it should have. Elena looked back. Yes, that was the tragedy. Then she stepped into her car and left him standing in the rain. The restructuring of Morty Legacy became a case study whispered about in business circles. Some called Elena ruthless, others called her brilliant, most called her inevitable, once they learned the full financial map. She renamed the company Vale Morty Infrastructure for 6 months, then quietly dropped Morty altogether. Vale Infrastructure Group. The old family crest came down from the headquarters lobby. In its place, Elena installed a simple bronze inscription. Legacy is not blood. Legacy is what survives your character. Employees stopped to photograph it. Valeria heard about the inscription from an old society friend who mentioned it with fake sympathy over lunch. How painful, the woman said, sipping tea, to have your family motto replaced. Valeria smiled stiffly. Businesses change. Yes, the woman said, especially when they are mismanaged. The lunch ended early. Invitations stopped coming soon after. Valeria had believed society was loyal to names, but society was loyal to power. Without the mansion, without the company, without the private donations she once made from corporate funds, she became what she had always feared becoming. Ordinary. Bianca tried to become an influencer, posting tearful videos about betrayal and family legacy theft. The internet was not kind. Former employees commented about unpaid invoices. Former classmates mentioned her cruelty. Someone leaked a clip of her shouting at lobby security. Within days, her attempt at public sympathy became public mockery. Cassandra attempted to sell her story to tabloids, but legal warnings from Vale Global ended the negotiations quickly. Her father's clinics entered receivership. Creditors claimed the family had misrepresented revenue projections. Cassandra moved into a smaller apartment owned by an aunt who charged her rent in advance. Adrian, stripped of title, spent months in a kind of living purgatory. He was not homeless. Elena had not been petty enough to leave him destitute. Personal assets not tied to corporate fraud remained his, but compared to the empire he had taken for granted, his life felt reduced to its true size. He rented a modest apartment. He sold his watches. He attended court-mandated financial oversight meetings. He visited Cassandra once after the baby was born. The child was a boy, tiny and innocent, with no responsibility for the storm that brought him into the world. Adrian held him with trembling hands and cried quietly, not because the baby solved anything, but because the child deserved better than the adults around him had been. Cassandra watched him from the hospital bed, her face pale and tired. "His name is Leo," she said. Adrian nodded. "It's a good name." "You can still fight Elena," Cassandra said weakly, "for his inheritance." Adrian looked at his son. Then at Cassandra. "No," he said, "I'm done confusing inheritance with love." Cassandra turned her face away. Adrian began paying child support from what he earned consulting for a small firm that did not care about his last name. It was humbling work, real work. No private elevator, no executive dining room, no assistant smoothing his mistakes before they reached him. He made mistakes. He learned. He became quieter. Whether that made him better, only time could decide. Elena heard about the child through Miriam, who handled necessary legal boundaries. "Adrian is not contesting anything," Miriam said one afternoon. Elena signed a document. "Good." He asked whether you would allow him to write you a letter. Elena paused. Outside her office, the city moved under a pale winter sky. On her desk, her father's pen lay beside a small white ceramic box. Inside that box were the baby shoes, returned to her through her attorney after Adrian found them. Elena had almost thrown them away. Instead, she kept them, not as a wound, but as proof that grief could be survived without becoming cruelty. "He can write it," she said. "That does not mean I will read it." Miriam nodded. Months passed. Then a year. Elena rebuilt the company with a discipline the Mortys had never possessed. She sold vanity properties and invested in affordable housing developments. She converted one abandoned luxury hotel project into a women's business incubator. The press loved that detail, but Elena did not do it for applause. She did it because once, at 19, She had stood in a library with wet shoes and no family beside her, and someone had mistaken her loneliness for weakness. She wanted other women to have rooms where they could build before the world saw them coming. One evening, after a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the New Vale Center for Enterprise, Rosa approached her. The former maid from the Morty mansion now worked as facilities director, promoted after Elena learned she had managed the entire household budget for years, while Valeria took credit for efficiency. "Ms. Vale," Rosa said, smiling, "there is someone here to see you." Elena looked toward the entrance. Valeria Morty stood near the doors. She wore a simple grey coat, no pearls, no cane, no crown of silver arrogance. Age had not softened her face, but defeat had carved truth into it. Security waited for Elena's signal. Elena gave a small nod. Valeria approached slowly. For a moment, neither woman spoke. "Elena," Valeria said. "Valeria." The older woman looked around the center. Young entrepreneurs moved through the space, carrying laptops, coffee, folders, ambition, life, movement, the opposite of the Morty mansion, where silence had been polished until it shone. "You built this from our ruins," Valeria said. "No," Elena replied. "I built this from my own foundation. Your ruins only cleared the land." Valeria absorbed the correction. A year earlier, she would have attacked. Now she only nodded. "I came to say something," Valeria said. Elena waited. Valeria's mouth tightened around words that had likely taken months to form. "I was wrong. It was not enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. Elena, I measured you by cruel standards because those were the standards used on me. I believed a woman's security came from controlling the family, producing heirs, guarding the name. I turned my fear into a weapon and called it tradition." Elena studied her, and Bianca. Valeria looked away. Bianca is learning slowly, painfully. Elena is not a lesson plan for your family. I know. Do you? Valeria met her eyes. I do now. Elena said nothing. Valeria took a breath. I am not asking for the house, or money, or forgiveness. Then what are you asking for? A chance to apologize without being owed absolution. Elena looked past her, toward a group of young women gathered around a conference table, laughing over a pitch deck. She thought of the mansion, the dinners, the insults, the night she walked out. She thought of power and how easily it became cruelty when held by frightened people. Finally, she said, "Then apologize." Valeria's eyes glistened, but she did not cry. "I am sorry," she said, "for every time I made you feel small because I was terrified you might not be, for every silence I demanded from you, for every insult I allowed and every wound I dismissed. I am sorry for calling you nothing when you were the only person in that house who understood value." Elena's throat tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Thank you for saying it." Valeria nodded, accepting the boundary. As she turned to leave, Elena spoke again. "Valeria." The older woman stopped. "Do not mistake my listening for reconciliation. I won't. And do not mistake your apology for repair." Valeria lowered her head. "I understand." She walked out alone. Rosa, who had been watching from a distance, came to Elena's side. "Are you all right?" she asked. Elena looked at the door Valeria had exited through. "Yes," she said, "I think I am." That night, Elena went home to an apartment overlooking the river, not the mansion. She had sold the mansion months earlier to a foundation that converted it into a residential school for girls agging out of foster care. The ballroom where Valeria once hosted cold charity dinners became a library. The dining room where Bianca mocked Elena became a study hall. The master bedroom, where Cassandra had tried to claim victory, became the office of the school director, a woman with 3 degrees and a laugh loud enough to chase ghosts away. People asked Elena why she did not keep the mansion as a trophy. She always gave the same answer. I don't collect cages. In her apartment, Elena made tea and opened the drawer where Adrian's letter remained unread. For months, she had moved it from desk to shelf to drawer, not because she was afraid of it, but because she wanted to be sure reading it would not reopen a door she had already locked. That night, she opened it. Elena, I have started this letter more times than I deserve to admit. Every version sounded like an excuse, so I kept tearing them up. There is no excuse. I was weak where I should have been loyal. I was proud where I should have been humble. I let my mother's approval matter more than your dignity. I let my sister's cruelty pass because confronting it would have forced me to confront myself. I let Cassandra into our marriage because she made me feel powerful at a time when I knew I was failing. You warned me about the company. You warned me about debt. You warned me about carelessness. I heard criticism because I was too arrogant to recognize wisdom. I found the shoes. I know I had no right to touch that grief. I am sorry for leaving you alone inside it. I am not writing to ask you back. I know that life is gone because I killed it. I am writing because someday, if I become a better man, it will be because losing you forced me to stop being the man who thought love could survive neglect. I hope you are free. Adrian. Elena read it once. Then again. She folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She did not cry, but she did sit very still for a long time. Freedom, she had learned, did not always arrive with joy. Sometimes it arrived as quiet, sometimes as an empty chair across from you, sometimes as a life no longer shaped around surviving someone else's selfishness. Her phone buzzed. A message from Miriam. Board vote passed unanimously. Affordable housing expansion approved. Elena smiled. There it was. The future. Not the one Adrian promised, not the one Valeria demanded, not the one Bianca mocked or Cassandra tried to steal. Hers. 2 years after the night Elena walked out, Vale Infrastructure held its annual gala in the renovated Central Train Hall, a building Morty Legacy had once abandoned as unprofitable. Elena had restored it into a public-private development hub, preserving its old arches and turning its empty platforms into market spaces for small businesses. The city's most powerful people attended. So did the employees. That mattered more to Elena. She wore emerald green, the same color as the earrings from her father, and carried no visible sign of the woman who had once sat quietly at the edge of Morty tables. Yet those who looked closely could see the past in her posture, not as damage, as architecture. Miriam stood beside her near the balcony. You realize half the room is afraid of you. Only half. Miriam laughed. Across the hall, Rosa directed event staff with effortless authority. Young founders from the Vale Center displayed their products. Former Morty employees now led departments with transparency and fair pay. The company that had once served one family now served thousands. Near the end of the evening, Elena stepped onto the stage. The applause was long. She waited it out. Then she spoke. When I first entered the business world, I believed power was something people gave you when you proved yourself worthy. I was wrong. Power is something you build when no one is clapping. It is built in rooms where people underestimate you. It is built in silence, in discipline, in the refusal to become cruel simply because others were cruel to you. The room quieted. Elena looked over the crowd, seeing not enemies, not admirers, but witnesses. There are people who inherit buildings and call that legacy. There are people who inherit names and call that character. But real legacy is what remains after truth arrives. It is the worker whose paycheck clears, the young woman whose business gets funded, the home built for a family who needs one, the door opened for someone who was told she did not belong. She paused. My father once told me power is safest when fools cannot see it. I still believe that, but I have learned something else. Power is strongest when it protects more than pride. Applause rose again, deeper this time. At the back of the hall, unnoticed by most, Adrian stood in a dark suit that was not new but well kept. He had not planned to attend. An old colleague had invited him, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps mercy. He watched Elena under the lights and understood with painful clarity that he had once been married to a woman he never truly met. Not because she hid. Because he never looked. Beside him, Valeria stood quietly. She had been invited by the foundation board, not as a guest of honor, but as a donor after selling the last of her jewelry to fund a small scholarship in the name of women rebuilding after family hardship. It was not grand. It was not enough to rewrite history. But it was a beginning. Bianca did not attend. She was working her first real job as an assistant at a small design firm where no one cared that she had once been a Morty. She was terrible at it at first, then less terrible, then, slowly, useful. Humility did not transform her overnight. It simply forced her to meet the world without servants. Cassandra lived in another city with her son. She never recovered the lifestyle she had chased, but she eventually found work managing appointments at one of the few clinics not tied to her father's collapse. Whether she became better or merely quieter, no one knew. Elena made sure Leo's support payments were protected through a legal trust Adrian funded from his own earnings. The child would not pay for his parents' choices. That was Elena's final mercy. And perhaps her clearest victory. After the gala, Elena stepped outside onto the old train platform, away from the crowd. The night air was cool. The tracks had been removed years ago, replaced by stone pathways and trees in copper planters. Above her, the restored clock tower struck 11. Adrian approached slowly, stopping several feet away. Elena. She turned. This time, seeing him did not hurt. That surprised her. Adrian, she said. I won't take much of your time. You never did know how to ask for a little. He smiled faintly, accepting the wound because it was deserved. I wanted to say congratulations. Thank you. And goodbye. Elena studied him. He continued, I'm moving. A firm in Lisbon offered me a position, smaller work, honest work. I think it will be good for me. I hope it is. He looked toward the glowing hall behind her. You did what my family never could. What is that? You made the name bigger by removing hours from it. Elena said nothing. Adrian's eyes held regret but no demand. That mattered. I loved you badly, he said. I'm sorry. Elena felt the wind move between them. Once those words might have undone her. Now they only landed softly at the edge of a life already rebuilt. I know, she said. Can you forgive me? Elena looked at the clock tower, then at the city beyond it. Forgiveness. People spoke of it as if it were a door that opened into reconciliation. Sometimes it was only a key you used to leave the prison of remembering. I forgive the man you were, she said, but I will never return to him. Adrian nodded. That is more than I deserve. Yes, Elena said, it is. He laughed once, not with humor, but recognition. Then he stepped back. Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye, Adrian. He walked away. No music swelled, no rain fell, no dramatic collapse marked the moment. Only distance. Only peace. Elena remained on the platform after he left, watching the lights of the hall flicker against the glass doors. For the first time in years, she thought of the young woman in the university library, soaked from rain, clutching finance books, believing survival meant staying strong enough not to need anyone. She wished she could go back and tell her that love should never require disappearance, that silence could protect, but it could also imprison, that a woman's worth was not in being chosen, not in being desired, not in becoming a mother, wife, ornament, maker, or sacrifice. Worth was not granted. It was lived. The old clock tower struck once more. Elena touched the emerald earring at her ear and smiled. Somewhere, perhaps, her father would have understood. The next morning, a young reporter asked Elena what she considered her greatest victory. The acquisition, the company turnaround, the fall of the Morty dynasty, the Women's Enterprise Center. Elena looked through the window of her office, where sunlight spilled across the desk her father's pen now rested on. My greatest victory, she said, was not becoming like the people who tried to break me. The reporter wrote it down. Elena returned to work. Because empires built on pride collapse the moment truth enters the room. But empires built on discipline, dignity, and justice do something far more dangerous. They last. Dear viewers, what would you have done if you were Elena, stayed and fought inside a house that disrespected you, or walked away in silence and let your success speak louder than revenge? This story reminds us that betrayal exposes character, greed destroys families, and the people we underestimate may be the very ones holding the keys to everything we think we own. Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is not weak. They are simply waiting for the right moment to reveal their power.